wrapping up Apple's peak performance event, and looking at what might be next. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by our Patreon patrons. Help support MacVoices and gain access to the MacVoices Slack and MacVoices After Dark at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is part 3 in the MacVoices Live panel's discussion of Apple's peak performance event. This time around, though, you'll probably notice that 2 people are missing. Jeff Gamet and I had to leave early to do a user group meeting with a group in Colorado, so David Ginsburg took the host role and continued the discussion of Apple's peak performance announcements. And also, they took the conversation in a direction I would not have anticipated, looking forward to what the Mac Pro, the Apple Silicon Mac Pro, may offer that even the Mac Studio doesn't. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to a point Mike Rose made about by observing that this is the first time Apple's maybe decoupling your monitor from your CPU, and as I commented earlier, we can see now that it's clear in terms of the rapid rate of innovation of the processors in iPhone and then the M series, that Apple is moving ahead very dramatically. That I'm wondering if they're starting to maybe think that the guts, the processor and the memory embedded in that tiny little box, that's a disposable component, and the long-lived component is going to be a high-quality display. I don't know that this just occurred to me here during this conversation, but it seems that Apple does have a proven track record of innovation and yearly updates on their processor technology, and they may be thinking, especially if they're trying to cater to pros, that what they need is updates of regular updates of processing power to try to deliver their systems in such a way that they minimize the overall expense by not jerking around to have to buy a new monitor every year, but giving you the capability that you could get a performance upgrade every 12, 18, 24 months, because Apple seems to is on the verge of coming out with them on an annual basis.
But people have been asking for that for years.
Since they
and
stopped
years
doing
and
it.
And since they stopped doing it, and basically saying exactly that, like, I don't want to replace my monitor every year or every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally, I had given up that, Apple is never going to do that. So it's really interesting that apparently they've changed their tune on that, because, they were always...
Well, they've been doing that a lot lately, though, right? I mean, like does anyone else look at the new 14 and 16 inch chonky boys and get a strong PowerBook G4 vibe from that Hummer? Because that's what I'm getting. Number
I have
one,
the 16.
Number 2, they went, look at all these individual ports you could be using. What is that? Courage? That you gave me a bunch of stuff that you used to give me that you took away, and now you've given it back because courage? What?
And I have my headphone jack back.
Right. See, This is what I'm saying. So it just sort of feels like Apple has realized that we tried giving everybody a USB-C port, and for an extra $400 you can get 2 USB-C ports to rub together for heat. And if those are your choices, it's not a lot of choices. But now you can get one that has an HDMI port on the side, or and a USB or 2, and another thing, and one of those headphone jacks. And that looks like the machine that I had 2 computers ago, before I actually upgraded to something a little more modern that didn't have as many ports. So, Apple is realizing ports may not be the worst idea. And letting people upgrade their display on a different schedule than their processor, I'm sure we're going to find people falling all over themselves about the revolution that Apple has done by peeling the computer out of the back of the friggin' screen. But this is how the rest of the world does it. And there's a reason that none of those people went to an exclusively all-in-one or, a single port. Are you plugging in your time machine drive or are you plugging in your power? Like you decide, like, come on. So the fact that Apple kind of loosened up on all of that, I feel like is just sort of a relief. Like, now I can plug in an HDMI thing without needing a whole nother thing.
I think it's great. And even, the Power Mac Power, what is that? Mac Pro, that sort of started, and although I'm wondering what is going to be the point of an expandable silicon Mac Pro? Because what do you put in there other than video cards and
fans?
Yeah, fans.
You put fans in your slots?
No.
That's a personal question, Jeff.
Anyway, I think this M1 Ultra is already faster than external graphics cards. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to be able to, the whole thing is they've got this new architecture where external graphics cards don't really make sense.
Yeah.
So what would you put in a slot in a Silicon Mac Pro? Why would there be anything to put in it?
Well, for creative pros, there is a variety of other devices, to
like
capture.
What?
Capture cards. Like I just recently we set someone up with a capture card, like basically like a USB interface for your microphone, but you use it for video, more or less. DAX, as Mike put in the chat, your digital audio converter. Maybe MIDI devices, depending on, exactly what kind of stuff you're working on.
Most of those are external devices, which are USB-C or Thunderbolt these days anyway.
Yeah, but
right.
No,
So
you can get a capture card that has.
Go for it, Guy.
I was going to say you can get a card that has 4 HDMI inputs. Mm-hmm. So if you're a network guy and you've got a bunch of cameras coming in from everywhere, you can plug them all into the same computer, which in turn will make your little studio that you have to set up for NFL or whoever much easier to deal with.
Is there Mac OS software that supports that now on the Mac Pro?
Who knows? I don't know.
Well, that's an important point.
If somebody comes out with a card, they're going to have software to support it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not true. There's definitely cards that don't work in Macs.
Right, but if it does work in a Mac, it behooves you to make sure that there's software to run it.
I mean, isn't like known NVIDIA cards just don't work, right?
Right.
Well, it wouldn't be maybe it wouldn't be an NVIDIA card. It could be by somebody else.
NVIDIA has to get in that game first.
Elgato. Wow.
But traditionally, the Mac market is small.
It's a senior moment.
There are other manufacturers like Blackmagic, et cetera.
There you go.
In the professional video space. So, but I think going to Jim's point is, again, it's a question of time, right? Today there's a large extent of PCI cards that you can put into a PC, you can put into a Mac Pro. Yeah, you can imagine dialing into the future that they're all external devices that you plug in with a USB-C cable. It's just a question of how do you get from one to the other. And a lot of the video guys I know, they don't want to be jerked around having to go out and upgrading a computer is one thing, but all the other peripherals, it doubles or triples the amount that they need to spend if they were to try to go forward. So so I think that's the thing is I think it seems to me that Apple is recognizing in some way that the expandability and modularity, there are different ways to accomplish that. But that's an important part of appealing to a professional, pro audience. And I think the Mac Studio looks like it's going to be a great rendering, and hopefully, with other capability, great machine for color grading. Given the what did you say, they have 800 gigabyte per second bandwidth. So. I think they're trying to get their way back into the graces of the creative video pros out there.
Yeah. Well, just go
the
back
pros. If you build it, they will come.
let's go back to the Mac Studio brief. And they did announce that there's 48 gigabytes of memory on a video card that you can get as a maximum. I mean that's unheard of a device to have that capability right off the bat. I mean, yeah, you can get expansion cards. We'll be looking for that when the Mac Pro does come out, if that's going to have that capability. But right now, this Mac Studio is fully capable with video.
It's
just for that alone. I mean, look at the memory. We didn't even talk about memory yet. I mean, the M1 Ultra can go 128 gigs of RAM, and this memory speed was 800 gigabytes a second. I mean, they've really outdone themselves with this machine, and I think the pros are going to be very pleased. And it's going to be, I think already it's out until mid-April before you can get one now, because they already went on sale today. So I have a feeling that Apple's going to be very successful with this machine.
There are definitely people who there's a gap between people who have a mini that does everything that they need for it to do, what their actual requirements are, not what people think they need. That's a separate conversation. But in fact, that's probably a separate podcast. But what people have and how well it performs for them at the M1 Mini, and then the people at the Mac Pro. And there are people who need more than a Mini, but less than the car that it takes to buy the Mac Pro that you need, before we even get to a display. So like, there are a whole lot of people who need something like that, who, for a friend of Mike and I's, Dave Kalo used to say swatting a fly with a Buick, like would be, buying a Mac Pro in that particular instance. And so this is definitely something for people who are using it professionally. Like Mike said earlier, if this is a thing that you can write off on your taxes, then, if it's the right purchase for you, that's really, that's a thing that's really important, because there are people who needed more than the iMac Pro was giving them, more than a Mac Mini is giving them now, and can definitely get a solid performer for a lot less than what that Pro was going to be. And it's kind of future-proofed, because it's not like Apple's getting out of the Apple Silicon game anytime soon.
True. The only thing that I would call out we've talked a little bit about the expandability, PCI Express versus external expandability. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with plugging stuff in, especially when you have all those Thunderbolt ports to play with. But as Jim has seen the link I just threw in the chat, there is a big functional difference between what Apple is offering now with the Mac Studio in one particular axis, one particular capacity, and what the 2019 Mac Pros can do, and that is RAM. You max out with the M1 Ultra maximum capacity on the Studio. You're maxing out at 128 gigabytes of RAM, because the RAM is part of the system on a chip. And that's as much as you can do. The Mac Pros, the current gen Mac Pros, you can cap out at 1.5 terabytes of RAM. And you can bet your puppy that there are people out there that have loaded up those machines and are getting the production value and the performance out of them by putting that much RAM, by putting 512, 768, a gig, a terabyte or more of RAM into those boxes. So what do we know? What can we predict about the Apple Silicon Mac Pro? It will have expandable RAM. It's going to figure out a way to have off-die RAM. And that is going to be something that people will pay for. So we already know that you can pay $4,000 for a Mac today that comes in a little box. Imagine what you're going to pay for a Mac Pro that comes in a big box. Well, one of the things you're going to be paying for is that RAM expandability when it arrives.
You know what, Mike?
If that happens, it won't be with an M1 chip.
No,
it would have to be whatever the next chip is.
I'm going to guess that I think it will not have 1.5 terabyte capacity on a Apple Silicon Mac Pro, because that whole thing is based on having that RAM on the chip. And the minute they move it off, the performance is just kills
drops.
It.
Yeah, but it is. But again, think of it this way. Think of it this way. Having a bodacious amount of RAM, connected to the device is going to be buttloads faster than if you had an SSD. So it's all about caching and tiering.
Hey guys, I just want to point out something that was introduced today, which was a new silicon interface for the M1 architecture, Ultra Fusion. So
We haven't even touched on that.
Well, we talked about it. We talked about it, but not in depth here. But to Jim's point, Jim's saying, well, the way the Apple Silicon works is you have the RAM on the die. Yeah, that's how it works now. But we just introduced a new bus. We just found out a way to interconnect an M1 or an Apple Silicon CPU with something else. Today, it's that dual die package with that gives you the M1 Ultra. Tomorrow, it might be an M2 with off-package RAM, but using that same wide bus.
Because of physics.
Mike, I agree.
Physics is a problem there.
Hang on. Go ahead.
Physics is a problem for
Jim.
Mark.
So, Mike, I agree with the direction you're pointing that Apple might come out with another, bodaciously big chip, loaded with RAM. I think today, the thing they called their Ultra Fusion was not a new bus. It was a narrowly defined widget to connect, one of the chips to the other. So could they expand that in the future? Yes, they could. But I think that's a very interesting idea that they come out with another die about the same size that is basically all RAM or multiple of those.
Right.
That would certainly be a very fast kick-ass machine. But right now we're speculating. This is fact-based fiction.
We're speculating on the engineering. My point is that there is a very obvious capability gap, and it is not possible to tell consumers of the current Gen Mac Pro, you have to accept a degradation. You have to accept a rollback in your ability to get high volumes of RAM in these machines. So, Jim,
right. I agree with you, and that's got to be done. I agree with you, and that's why we haven't seen whatever Apple's going to reveal for an Apple Silicon based Mac Pro or whatever they call it, Mac Pro Ultra.
Today's edition of Mac Voices is supported by our Patreon sponsors. Support Mac Voices at any level and gain access to the Mac Voices Slack, where you can interact with the Mac Voices live crew, participate in our discussions, and get your questions answered. You also get access to Mac Voices After Dark, the uncensored, unscripted, and always enjoyable discussions before and after the Mac Voices live show. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices, and thanks for supporting Mac Voices.
I think if they came out with half a terabyte of RAM as the max, that would probably, the number of customers probably that have more than that now is probably vanishingly small. So I think it's quite possible that they could say, and it's not like, Apple gave up on, they had the trash can for years and years and years and said, that's it. And, so people had to use PCs. Yeah. I think Apple will be willing to give up some tiny slice of the market. If that, they
Jim,
can't.
Jim, you mix two ideas there. So if we could pull them apart, one is that I think a lot of the reason that trash cans stagnated was just because they were relying on third-party vendors, and they didn't come out, for whatever reason, with devices, that they could use to offer an upgrade path to. The other thing, in terms of the creative market, I've got to believe that it must hurt a lot of Apple people that that trash can was a failure, and that a lot of creative pros had to go to creating Hackintoshes based on Dell or HP gear because they were faster than anything Apple could provide. So
let me get to the chat here in the YouTube chat here. A couple of comments. Eric said the Mac Studio case and cooling design is what Intel-based Macs needed. So yeah, I can agree with that. And Brian F also said, wonder if we'll see a new form factor for the Mac Mini later in the year that would look more like the Mac Studio form. I don't know if they're going to look to expand on what the standard Mac Mini is.
I was surprised that they didn't do like a minor case update and give it a couple more Thunderbolt ports. That was kind of what I was hoping that they were going to do with the Mini, and then also release a bigger iMac. That was my expectations, and obviously, about as wrong could be. And that's wrong with RWONG instead of the other way around. So, yeah, I think that the Mac Mini probably sometime this summer will receive some kind of minor case update. It doesn't really need to go to an M1 Pro or an M1 Ultra. I don't think that's really the market for that.
That's
machine.
Not the market for it now. Now they have the Mac Studio,
because the Mac Mini with just the plain Jane M1 is a crazy screamer, and I love this thing. But if they would come out with a Mac Mini that had a few more ports, so that maybe I didn't need to have a Thunderbolt 3 dock or a little hub that has an internal slot for an SSD or any of those things, that I might consider getting one. But the flying the ointment, of course, is where does it go into the future with an M2 probably out later this year with a Mac Pro? I mean, what happens with something like the Mini? Does the Mini go away because the Studio is there to fill that slot?
I think there's still going to be a market for the lower end. I mean, there's still a lot of people out there who still want this. Yeah, I mean, 100%. Apple's. We know the love Apple didn't give the Mac Mini for a long time. That those 4 or 5 years that at least it was from 2014 to 2018, I think it was, before they finally came out. The 4 years before they came out of another new model. So, but they've been consistent now. They went from 2018 to 2020. So I can see them doing some minor bumps. Yeah, I mean, if they've got some improvements in the processing speed with that. So I just want to make sure I mentioned Brittany Smith had to leave. She was having some trouble with her mic. So thank you, Brittany, for being here. And Frank Petrie also had to leave. He was having troubles with his AirPods. And glad you both made it here today. So, I think that's what's really what's going on with the Mac Mini. I don't see anything else going to where it is today. I mean, at least I don't see it.
Did you all see that YouTube video where that guy made a tiny Mac Mini?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think most of that
crazy.
was he removed the power supply. He was using an external power supply, so that's a lot of where he got the smaller space from.
Because it was built in, yeah. So there's some crazy modders out there with that kind of stuff. So, I guess I'd like to just go around before we wrap up here. Is anybody going to buy any of this stuff today at all?
I'll go first. I mean, I wish I had been able to hold off my daughter buying a new. She got a new iPhone 12 a couple weeks ago because the new SE would have been a great fit. Although she really wanted a camera. One step up and the zoom camera on the 12. But I will say that as I said earlier, the iPad Air is super compelling and could even be a replacement for my 2-year-old iPad Pro at this point. The features that it loses versus the Pro don't matter that much to me. The features that it gains, especially the M1, are super compelling. So that may be on my shopping list sometime this spring.
All right. And Andrew, you shook your head. You're not touching this stuff, right?
No. For the iPhone, I have the latest, the iPhone 13 Pro. I'm not going for an SE. I have the Apple Watch 7 series. And what Guy was saying earlier, I think the M1 chip is still a powerful chip. I have the M1 MacBook Air, and it's been able to fulfill all my needs so far.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Mark, you think any market for you this for these new products?
I'm interested in the iPad Air, and I've discovered I could get $630 by trading in my iPad Pro. The reason I'm thinking about that is it's getting to the point where I'm using their case, and sometimes it doesn't connect, and I get these peripheral not recommended, not peripheral not identified, not supported error messages. Plus, sometimes I go and type, and it doesn't work. So it's becoming enough of a pain in the neck that maybe I'm thinking about replacing it. Especially I'm thinking maybe something a little bit smaller, because I bought it for the big screen, and all my use cases just didn't work and play out. So that is something I have to think about. The Macs, as I said, they're it's a wonderful piece of engineering. I don't have a need for it, and at those price points, it's a premium over some of the notebooks, and like Guy has said about his M1 Mac Mini. I have an M1 MacBook Air, and it's fast beyond any of my wildest dreams. So I don't see a Mac upgrade in my future, but iPad is the possibility.
How about you, Kelly? Are you looking at anything in here?
Well, the new Mac Studio, like whatever they're calling the big Mac without the display. I'm not looking to actually purchase one, but if somebody has $5,000 burning a hole in their pocket, I would be happy to give it a kind and loving home. And I would love very much for that to be a thing. The iPad Air would have appeal if I hadn't already pulled the trigger and gotten the M1 iPad Pro when it came out. Which now means that it makes a lot less sense. So I'm kind of interested to see where the iPad line ends up. Yeah. At the moment, I'm not looking at anything. I have an M1 MacBook Pro. I have an M1 iPad Pro, and I have an iPhone 12 that makes me very happy every day. So I'm not interested in like upgrading to the 13 now that they have green or anything like that. But it was nice to see attention paid, on a bunch of different fronts. I wish we'd maybe gotten an iPad mini update, because that would have been nice to know that they're still actually taking that seriously, and it's going to get a continued update schedule like the SE, but
didn't it just get a big update?
So it's still too new.
Yeah, well, it's still too new, but I'm hoping that like all of this means that we're getting the updates that we should, where attention's being paid and things are continuing to evolve, and I'm glad to see it. So yeah.
All right. I know Mark has a heart out here. Mark, we really appreciate you being here tonight, and doing all. I want to let everybody know how people can get a hold of you.
Easiest thing is Twitter at Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio, or same name on LinkedIn. So it's great. This is a normal panel, and Mike Rose. It's been a year or more since we've been on a show together, so I really enjoyed chatting with you.
It's a pleasure to see you, Mark.
Yes. So with you all, I need to leave. So thank you all, and have a good night. Okay.
Good night, Mark.
And I have to step away as well. So I'll
let's go ahead and wrap up. Go ahead.
Bye,
Mike, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Mike T. Rose. You can find the little show I do with someone else 3 squares below me on the Zoom here. Kelly and I are the co-hosts of the After Show, which is at aftershowpodcast.com and _aftershow on Twitter. And we just put out on Sunday, we put out our pre-event show where you can hear us make wild ass guesses and visit Kelly's House of Crackpot Theories that in retrospect seem a little goofy, but we had a good time.
All right, Mike.
That's every episode. We say some stuff that in retrospect is very, very goofy, and we had a good time. Yeah, that's like all of them. Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Mike.
Bye, Mike.
Andrew, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Twitter. My username is @AndrewOrNot. That's the username I use for a lot of things. I'm not very creative with names. I'm also an occasional guest on some podcasts. So here at MacVoices, and lately I am on In Touch with iOS.
I know. And that's
heard of that show.
It's going to happen again.
I feel like I've
week.
heard that once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, Andrew. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Guy Serle, where can people find you?
Oh my God, I'm everywhere. Mac Parrot of Vert Shark
Like it or
over
not.
on the Twitters. I know, like it or not. Also, vertshark.com is the website for all the odds and the vids. Guy's Daily Drive, where I drive in my car and say stuff because it's a really stupid thing to do. The mymac.com podcast that I do with Gaz for the last 11 years. We just had our 600th show a week and a half ago, and we're coming up on the 900th show overall, which the math doesn't work, but for some reason it does. I guess that's about it.
Well, thanks for being here, Guy. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jim Ray, thanks for being here as always. Always appreciate your insights on the developer angle of things here. And where can people find you?
Let's see. You can find my work at provue.com, PROVUE. And for more of a personal take, ProView Jim on Twitter.
Great. Thanks for being here. And last but certainly not least, Kelly Guimont. Thanks for making it. And where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter as Verso. You can find me over at The Incomparable, where I host a show called I Want My MCU TV, where we talk about the Marvel shows on Disney Plus. And you can also find me spinning up a new project now that I no longer host Daily Observations anymore, and haul Andrew onto my podcast every Friday and talk about security stuff. So maybe I can sweet talk him into doing something with me over at my new venture, which is The Slice at theslice.net.
Great. We're looking forward to that. And I wanted to thank everybody in the chat room tonight on YouTube. Really appreciate it. A lot of great questions. We really appreciate you giving us some input for the show tonight. You can find me on In Touch with iOS at intouchwithios.com. And you also find me on YouTube, youtube.com/DaveG65. We're going to have both Andrew and Kelly on the show this week to do our recap. So I'm looking forward to that. And I want to thank you for everybody that was here for listening. And Mac Voices Live is recorded every Tuesday night, most Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and any time that you're there. We really appreciate you coming there. And until next time, I want to bid you a good night and have a great evening.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.